Welcome, everybody, to this week's Griscom stream. Sorry for the abrupt intro. We're using this new system here, so I'm still sort of getting the hang of it. But I think we are live. Let me make sure. If you're not hearing me, let me know in the chat. But I think everything is good to go. Hold on, let me see something. I should be able to change my size of my head, but all right, whatever. How's everybody doing? Appreciate everyone's patience yesterday. A huge thunderstorm here just knocked out my power for a good 45 minutes. So I had to, if you were watching live on our post-game show last night, basically I just disappeared for the last 45 minutes. But I'm back now. Everything's fine. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this stream today. I like doing Thursdays, get to see some different folks, hear from different folks. Definitely taking more questions from the chat than normal today, so I will be looking at those right now. Let me pull them up. While we're doing it, man, I'll tell you, I think Garth Brooks is having a big comeback. Every time I've been listening to radio lately, Garth Brooks has been coming on, and it's been reminding me of some classic Garth Brooks songs. You ever heard the song That Summer? It's an older Garth Brooks song. It's like 1992, the year I was born. It's actually a really nasty song when you start to pay attention to it. It's all about a young boy who goes and works one summer on a ranch with a kind of widowed woman, and then this like 50-year-old plus woman basically takes away this like young 16-year-old's virginity. The song's a celebration, but boy, I don't think that really fly today. But yeah, and somebody asked me, I'll just get to the elephant in the room. Someone asked me last night during the post game, and I wasn't able to answer, how I'm doing after the Texas-Oklahoma loss. I will say I'm still very devastated by it. It was a tough game. I was watching at a packed bar here in Austin, and there's like 5 Oklahoma fans there who for most of the game were pretty quiet, and then towards the end started getting really loud. And I'll tell you what, look, I have a lot of friends, people I love from Oklahoma, but man, Oklahoma fans are some of the worst son of bitches I know. There was a guy who was straight up trying to pick a fight with me and my friend as they were coming back. And I don't know, maybe give him a little credit for boldness, but it was a tough day. But I'm looking forward to to winning out the rest of the season, maybe seeing Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game, because that'd be a lot of fun to be able to take it back from them at the last minute. Well, let me see. Yeah. Someone says, glad to hear you're all right. We thought you were trolling because of your freeze frames. Yeah. Well, in both times that my electricity went out, I look up to the sky because, the lights start going out, flickering up there. And that was the last image that got broadcast out. So they were pretty unfortunate looking photographs. Well, let's see, y'all. Well, we got Enrique wanted to ask if I've read the book Towards a New Socialism. I have not. I still appreciate the suggestion. I haven't been able to get around to it, but I have taken a note, and I'm looking forward to being able to checking it out. All right, let's see. Avery says 800 pages into Capital Volume 1. Hype to start Volume 2. Damn, you're killing it. A lot more than most folks. It's a hard text. Hopefully have somebody to read it with, because that does make a huge difference, just having somebody sort of bounce ideas off. If not, I don't know, maybe that could be something we could start with folks, patrons and things like that, having oh, here we go. Now I can change my face. I got it now. All right, well, maybe we'll start with the story then, while we're waiting for more people to show up and start asking questions in the chat. I think this show, I'm definitely looking to be taking more questions from the chat, things like that. I don't have any big rants and raves prepared, but I do have questions from last night that I wasn't able to get to, and 1 or 2 stories. But feel free to just jump in with whatever. But I wanted to share this. This came to me courtesy. It was actually Left Reckoning reunion over here. This came to me courtesy of our friend in Costa Rica, Sam Goodman, who sent me. Let me pull this up. Sent me something regarding Shell, which has been. If people missed it yesterday, I did a whole thing at the top talking about Shell's energy podcast, which I'm telling y'all is actually much more sinister than it sounds. I mean, you would imagine a kind of misinformation situation that a podcast sponsored by Shell on climate change already sounds quite sinister, but it really is evil because it's extremely subtle, and the kind of arguments that they're making, primarily the main argument that you're getting from these Shell energy podcasts, is that the problem has to do with us, the consumer. We're just too short-sighted. We don't care enough about the environment. And if we just all change our behavior, then maybe Shell wouldn't have to drill for so much oil, which is just unbelievable when you remember all the kind of lobbying and government interventions that Shell does, not just in the United States, but around the world. To start blaming it on people's personal consumer choices is absurd. But that's the game. That's the strategy that they're going with, and I think it's worthwhile paying attention to it. But I wanted to highlight this. Yeah, there's a Shell Energy podcast. I believe it's called Energy Podcast. That might be. It's something really stupid and workshop like that. Really simple title. You can check it out. I mean, they're all 15-minute episodes. They're really subtle. Is the thing. Is like, I think the reason that I was so struck when I was listening to it. Is it wasn't just straight propaganda. There's a little bit of like, oh, if we do some self-criticism, here's some things we could be doing, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it's trying to present a view of climate change. Like, look, everybody's in it together. Shell is like trying to be a leader in solving the problems. And, we really just need to change people's attitudes and get politicians to be tougher. And what they mean by politicians getting tougher, by the way, is not putting more regulations on the oil and gas industry. What they mean by that is raising taxes on you, right? Which is like the preferred neoliberal pro-market solution, right? Don't put the costs on the businesses. Don't put the costs on the massively powerful corporations that have got us into this situation. Put the costs on everyday consumers. Let me share this with y'all because Sam Goodman sent me this this afternoon. And it was pretty much what we were talking about on the show yesterday. And then I was happy to see the author of this piece is also a recent guest on Left Reckoning. Here we go. Is that big enough for y'all? Maybe. Can y'all hear me when I do that? I don't know. I'm not expert in this enough yet. Let's see if that works. If it's not working, let me know. Shell CEO roasted at TED Climate Conference. He was foolishly invited to speak at. So Shell CEO Ben von Beurden spoke at a TED conference. He was interrupted by organizers, one of whom called him one of the most evil people in the world. And this is the kind of thing that I really do like to see. You see here, there's the banners, no future in fossil fuels. And this is the kind of insane media blitz that Shell has been doing going into COP26, trying to make it seem like their leaders are people who, should be, leading us in the fight against climate change, when these are people whose power should be completely expropriated. These should be made into public, publicly controlled organizations, and then very slowly having their full production scaled back so we can live in a green future, right? There is no future in privately owned oil companies because they will always put their profits above the rest of us. And again, if you listen to that podcast, they make that point constantly. They do it in a really subtle way. They say, well, I have a responsibility to all of the pension funds and all the retirement funds that are tied up in Shell Oil, right? And by that, what they mean is by shareholders. And it's a really kind of cute way that they're trying to get around that. So instead of you imagining, the actual people who are holding all those shares, right, which are capitalists looking to make an investment and a return on the destruction of the planet, trying to make it seem like it's grandma, just trying to, put a couple bucks together at the end of their life. So this story was by Brian Kahn and Donna Noor in Gizmodo. Should read the whole thing. But I like this right here. So he's speaking at this TED conference, and McDonald was finally invited to ask Van Burden a question, and things changed quickly, right? So they let him go for 20 minutes saying his bullshit. She said she'd like to offer a bit of context for the CEO's remarks, right? When he was saying, oh, consumers are the problem, right? He makes that same kind of argument. Consumers are the problem. They're the reason that we're in this thing. We need to change our behavior, right? Not they need to stop doing what they're doing. We, as citizens and consumers, need to change our behavior. She looked at him and she said, you should be ashamed of yourself. McDonald went on to say that Van Burden is responsible for so much death and suffering and called him one of the most evil people in the world. As she broke into tears, she chronicled Shell's long history of knowingly polluting the planet and ushering in the climate crisis. She also called the company out for its reported complicity in the horrific killing of Nigerian activists in the 1990s. Quote, if you were going to sit here and act like you care about climate action, why are you appealing the recent court ruling that Shell must decrease its emissions by 45% by 2030? She has, referring to a landmark May ruling from a Dutch court. Will you repeal this? As Van Bruden began to respond, McDonald cut him off as youth activists climbed onto the stage, unfurling banners that read, no future in fossil fuels. The activists walked out of the room as McDonald removed her mic and stepped off the stage to join them. As they walked out of the auditorium doors, they shouted, don't just watch us, join us. I thought that this was a really smart action. I think that coming at these, oil company CEOs directly by name is a very effective tactic. And I think it's really brave and important to be doing this now, as I was noting yesterday, that this is the new strategy for these oil companies to sort of start presenting themselves as organizations that get that climate change is a problem, and presenting solutions, again, that like benefit and maintain their power in a world that is going to make adjustments. I dedicated the whole opening of yesterday's show to this kind of argument that we're moving into a new era when it comes to climate change, that there are going to be actions, or at least feints at actions, right? Making it seem like governments are doing something, make it seem like corporations are doing something. And obviously they're going to be inefficient, and not at the scale that is necessary to do what we need to do. But we just need to start preparing ourselves for a new paradigm when it's not, we need to act on climate change and start really being serious about saying debating the harder questions, like what do we need to do and what should we not do? Because the oil companies and a lot of these organizations are already kind of sprinting into that space because they have platforms of power and people who they can call in the government. And they're going to start pursuing policies that are really damaging to people like us, and maintain their power. We can't allow that to happen. But let's see. I'm sure we had some questions and stuff like that in the chat. So in the Twitch chat, we got the extra. How's it going, brother? And Javaloriza. What's up, Dave? Nice looking background combo. Appreciate it. I saw we had some questions in here. I'll just sort of go down the line. Please do a Patreon reading thing with Capital. Yeah, I mean, I think that might be something that we can try to support the platform for it. I don't know if Matt and I are going to be able to do lead everybody through it, but I think, trying to make space for people to be able to come together and organize those things would be really beneficial, because reading with other people is a huge help. What do you think of Michael Parenti's radical approach to the climate crisis and his call for working with capitalism? Michael Parenti, I'm not sure if you might mean Christian Parenti. Apologies if I'm wrong about that. I mean, Christian Parenti, I only am familiar with Christian Parenti's arguments on these things, but Christian Parenti makes an argument that I think is a reasonable one, and it's one that we have to start to deal with, which is that, waiting for, a complete socialist transformation of the system and the economy might not be viable in just with the reality of the climate crisis. So the left and socialists need to try to find ways to make dealing with climate change, I don't know, not necessarily palatable, but make the decision possible for capitalists to pursue, because if we have to wait for both things to happen at the same time, it might be too late. It's a tough thesis. I think it's very sober minded, and I think, like, for example, like I don't think that we shouldn't take an obstructionist view where if there are like reforms under, like, for example, American style capitalism that start to deal with the climate crisis, we should oppose them whole cloth. But we should also be wary of, who is taking control of these systems. Like we talked last night about how the federal government is already going to start leasing our water, federally controlled, publicly controlled water off the coast to wind turbine companies, right? Which positive development on some levels, but it's also ridiculous because the United States government could also be pursuing that as well. And all the, the hot talk about Biden being the next FDR, it shows how far away from any kind of, New Deal program we are. I mean, I think that we have to be sober-minded enough to be able to fight and advocate for kind of common sense solutions, as much as we can get them, while remembering and fighting the long-term goal, right? So it's not every kind of green development is good, because the fact is that what we're seeing with, like, for example, like Shell Corporation, those are not good developments, right? Especially if they're going to be experienced as taxes on the working class, right? That's something that we have to oppose. So I think it's trying to find a balance, but I don't know, not being so holier than thou that we can't sort of advocate for and fight for climate responses that are going to be helpful in the short term. That's a good question, and I highly suggest Christian Parenti's work on climate change. It's very interesting and convincing in a lot of ways. There's a really interesting debate that he has on Jacobin about nuclear power that I know pisses off a lot of my the good climate activist friends and thinkers that we know, because he's pretty down on nuclear. Duncan Chino says, what do you think of the idea of taking over the CPUSA instead of using the DSA? I don't think that that's a viable path. I mean, the CPUSA has the Communist Party of the United States has endorsed a strategy that we need to, like, uphold the Democratic Party and go through a period of, Democratic Party, basically like one party rule, to defeat the Republicans, right? So they endorsed Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders using that logic. And there's a lot of people within the organization, but those are the kind of official lines that are being taken from it. I just don't find there to be, unfortunately, much, we can sort of claim within that organization today that is like mobilized. Or the DSA is like continue to be mobile, right? So like the only argument that you could make would be if like the CPUSA membership was was a lot larger than it is today, and it's not. Let's see. Here we go. Do you think? Okay. Duncan Chino asked the same question. I have heard from Matt's other podcast, Literary Hangover, that he hates Fight Club. I did not know that. I get what he means. It's not good politics. It's anarcho-primitivist at best. But if you can fight any celebrity, right-wing personality, historical figure, who would you fight? Ooh. I mean, you might get me in trouble here. Who would I want to fight? I mean, there's plenty of folks, honestly. I mean, I think Milton Friedman could probably, if you were to be able to smack Milton Friedman a few times back in the day when he was pushing for, what he was saying was not school segregation, but essentially was, and pushing his kind of right-wing free marketeer dogma throughout this country, I think that'd probably be a helpful thing. Ricky, thank you for not only explaining the issues and philosophy behind your critiques and solutions, but also providing guidance on taking action, organizing. Thank you very much. I'm happy that you've been enjoying it. Thoughts on Texas, on the new Texas redistricting and how to move forward. Personally, if socialists engage in electoralism, it should be at a local level, similar to the far right Q strategy. So I'm not familiar with that last bit, I have to say, but I mean, the redistricting here in Texas is ridiculous. I mean, the way that they're redrawing the map just does not. Let me see if I can find a proposed map, because they're so crazy. Like the map that we already have right now. Let's see. I'm on Google right now, so just give me a moment to make sure that. Man, here we go. The thing about the as I'm pulling this up, I can just say a couple of things. Like, I think it's really important, specifically in the South, but even more so in Texas, to remember that when we're talking about new strategies for like how to win these states and to pull them away from Republican control, to remember that so much of the Republican strategy has been um, to essentially disenfranchise folks on a large scale, on a mass scale, or to try to pack people in kind of such obscure districts that their vote really doesn't count. Like mine, for example, like you look at people like look at the districts that go through Austin. Austin has about 5 districts that go through it congressionally, and there's nothing geographical or historical sort of governing those districts. I mean, they're just meant to sort of pull away more liberal votes from Republican vote. Let me see if I can show you though. Okay, let's see. These are some of the. Here we go. I can't. I'm not gonna be able to do this because I don't want to waste time with y'all, like looking for these maps to find a good one that to share with y'all. But I mean, they're ridiculous. The way that they're sort of drawn. I mean, there's like you can walk across, my congressional district here in Austin, and so the fact is that like, okay, well, that's the reality, and that's what they're doing. So we have to find a way, to beat them at that game. And one is just like, frankly, I think that what we've seen from the statewide Democratic Party in Texas has been has been a joke. I mean, the way that they lost in 2020, I think was quite despicable, and it put us in this situation. And not just that they lost, it was just that like people specifically like in South Texas were saying, y'all need to come down here, you need to campaign because something's happening and we're losing, right? And it's wild to see how many people who like live here, you know what I mean? Like they live in Texas. This isn't explaining the state to like a Yankee or something like that. They live here and they have this kind of bizarre fantasy of like a demographics as destiny strategy. There's a whole long piece in Texas Monthly that just came out on like why Democrats are losing Hispanics in Texas. And it reminded me, not to pat myself on the back too much, but of a video I did for Jacobin back in fall of 2020, talking about this kind of faulty strategy that a lot of liberals have. That they're saying like, oh, well, if somebody's, Hispanic or if somebody's Black, right, that they're going to sort of think in this way, right? This kind of really essentialist way of thinking. And like, look, you could do a lot with that from like a macro level. But when you start denying people's like, history and like everyone's like uniqueness, you get into a lot of trouble. And the fact is for example, in South Texas, a lot of people, they don't consider themselves, to be a lot of people, they when they do the census, they check the white box, right? So this whole kind of notion of, I don't know, of politics sort of like coming with skin tone is really being challenged in Texas right now. And just so people who aren't familiar with aren't familiar with the dynamic, understand what I'm saying. It's not that like Hispanics in South Texas are like voting overwhelmingly for Republicans, but there has been like a growth in Republican voters, and it's a lot higher than most people sort of had expected. And that's because the same kind of appeals that appeal to working class white people and working class like Black communities in Texas appeal to working class South Texans. A lot of them consider themselves to be Texans first and foremost. So, if you want to be able to challenge the right wing apparatus, then I think we have to, and we can. You first need to understand that these kind of just vague appeals to identity are not going to be the solution. And the fact is that you have to really do the actual damn work of knocking on doors and investing in communities and being present in communities. And the state Democratic Party refused to do that in 2020, which cost. I mean, the presidential election was, whatever. That was a whole wild thing that Biden was going to win Texas. But what really happened is that it cost a lot of state representatives their seats. People were saying that the Democrats were going to take the state house and the state Senate, and they didn't come anywhere close to that. In fact, they lost seats. So I think like really challenging that kind of strategy, or idea that like you just have been like given voters by God, right? By pure chance. I think that needs to be challenged, and remind people that you really have to go back to winning every kind of vote. Um, that being said, too, is also remembering that so much of the situation that we are in Texas and across the country is because there's one, mass opting out of voting, and two, like a very deliberate strategy by the Republicans to basically try to rig elections in their favor. So you have to be able to go into these fights with those kind of precepts if you want to get forward. And Enrique had another question for me. I'm just going to thoughts on Robert Evans, journalist and podcast host. I have not seen it, so I'd have to look. Um, I want to make sure I'm not missing any questions. And I saw we have a question in the Twitch chat. I'll get to in 1 second. Do you think Alex Jones will still be around after these two lawsuits? I mean, I don't know. I don't think anything can kill Alex Jones, but he's certainly hurting. I want to catch up with the chat because I'm a little bit behind. All right, y'all are pushing the Prescott Bush. Young says Prescott Bush is my choice. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a frustrating kind of vote situation here. I have a feeling Matthew McConaughey might not run after he got pretty embarrassed pretty bad recently. Hey, David, I'm working on a documentary about 2008, and I was wondering if you have any good pointers for staying focused in terms of presenting information. Too easy to fall down rabbit holes. I mean, I think that the big points to make are that showing who got punished and who didn't. And the fact is that it was working and middle class folks who got the brunt of the pain, and while those at the top, they ended up getting taken care of. Specifically, I think you can focus on like the bad loans that were going out, but I think it's very worthwhile to focus on the fact that the banks knew that these were quite risky and were pursuing these kind of packaging situations with all of the loans that sort of exposed the entire financial system. I think like pointing out to the fact that they thought that they could just, I don't know, create enough financial products that they could actually sweep something that they knew was happening in the actual world under the rug, I think is an interesting angle for looking at the financial crisis. John says, "How you doing?" I'm doing good, John. Thanks for asking. So Javier in the Twitch chat says, asking as a non-U.S. citizen, are there any mechanisms for the Democrats or Biden to make Sinema and Manchin resign or have any recall election? I know they don't want that, but are there mechanisms, executive order or something? There are not. And that is something that is unique about the United States, at least compared to like other parliamentary systems, is that, rather than really being a member of a party proper, you're sort of held as like an individual member who sort of like has a loose relation with the party. The party can do a lot. I mean, the party could cut off funding. The party could stop their access to voter information and things like that. For their next reelection campaign. I mean, the party could really punish you, but it would be kind of like financially in the sense of like campaign contributions and like materially in the terms of like not sharing databases or information with you in your reelection bid. The Democratic Party very rarely does things like that, except for when they're trying to target progressives. Well, that's a good question. Nicholas, you're gonna make me mad here. How do you feel about Austin becoming the Los Angeles of Texas? Left 5 years ago to get away from the crowds and overpriced housing. Median house prices now over $500,000 there. It's tough. I mean, Austin. The thing about Austin is you can feel it here that there's a purging. I mean, I'm from here, and like I grew up in a neighborhood that was sort of shifting when I was living there, from something that was like sort of looked down on or sort of dangerous to something that became sort of fun and funky, and now it's just filled with rich folks. So I can see it very clearly. I don't know about it becoming Los Angeles, because and what I mean by that is like you can say LA, Texas, or San Francisco, or whatever, New York, Brooklyn. The fact is, we're all sort of living in this like unaffordability crisis. I've not lived anywhere in my life where housing felt like something that was secure, affordable for working families in those communities. So unfortunately, Austin's continuing that. The problem with Austin is that once you start getting tech money is like one of the worst when it comes to like, I don't know, trickling down. Tech is one of holds its profits the most because it needs sort of the least amount of like other industries springing up around it compared to like more traditional industrial manufacturing. So what I mean by that is like tech money and like tech industries in general are really good at sort of holding profits within them rather than sort of spreading those profits around like other industries that pop up to service them or to help them. So you can see that. I mean, there's parts of town that I can't go to anymore. I mean, honestly, I'm a South Austin boy all the way through, and that's pretty much where I spend my time. Just because when I go into the city proper, it's sort of devastating and hard to be around. It's like a bunch of Yankees and like California people. It doesn't feel like home as much to me, but I don't know. When you're from somewhere and you love it, it's sort of you feel like it's worth to come back and fight and at least be a part of the community. Um, I know it's tough though. All right, let's see. Oh, our friend in Argentina says, just a heads up, Argentina this Sunday, October 17th, is Peronist Loyalty Day. It's probably going to be the first massive pro Fernandez government mobilization since pandemic. Hope I can send you guys some dope footage. Yeah, please do. I'd love to see what's going on there. Y'all are getting me mad with this. Um, Yeah, and the craziest thing, it's funny to think about what happened with all the festivals here in Austin, and sort of like what that ended up meaning for the future of the town. As somebody says, it's a carpetbagger Airbnb in Southern ritzy chic imperialism. I mean, there's so many Airbnb houses. And the thing that really kills me, man, is the walls. Like I don't know, like I'm a Southern guy, and it's like Southern towns have always had like a pretty proud tradition of having front porches and you see your neighbors and you say hello, but the worst thing is all these people with money, they're building these fortresses where they just here's a big wall in front of my property. It's definitely tough. um I don't know how much they're going to force Alex Jones to pay, but he's definitely losing. um Nicholas Rodriguez has found the next spot to get away from all this. They won't share where that is though. What's your favorite foods you can only get in Texas? I mean, it's barbecue for sure, friend. Um, Barbecue and breakfast tacos. Uh, Simple. I mean, there's obviously great restaurants. One thing that's really fun about Austin food actually is like we have a really great Japanese scene here and always have. And I actually didn't realize how deep the Japanese history goes in Texas. It's not a huge part of the population, but there were a lot of folks who came in the early 1900s to help build up the rice industry here. So a lot of people in the Rio Grande Valley, a lot of people in South Texas, like near Houston. But I don't know if that's why Austin has a really good Japanese food scene. But my whole life, Austin's always had a really good Japanese food scene, despite having like a 1% population Japanese folks. But definitely, I mean, come for the barbecue. I'm not going to tell you my favorite places because they're secret, but some good places to go and have a good time. Leroy and Lewis is a lot of fun. I've been really enjoying this place called Distant Relatives near where I live, actually, which is really, really interesting. It's a different kind of barbecue for sure. It's what they call like um, West African diaspora cooking. So it's really kind of celebrate and paying homage to all of the kind of culinary traditions that sort of came and were developed in the United States, but that originally came from West Africa. And it's a really interesting place. Um, oh, there you go. Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about? We got the Yankees Anti-Defamation League, and I'm in trouble. I probably am. I know. I realize that it's just like I don't know, second nature to me to say stuff like that when I'm talking about people I don't like who are not from here. Pete Terry's is best. Yeah, I really like Pete Terry's too. Um, Puda says, this is a bit of a shame. I live in the South, but never in a big city or area that got gentrified, though. I mean, that's a good thing, right? Actually, and you don't want to romanticize places that are disinvested from either too much because they have their own struggles. Um, who was it that told you that John Boehner is a master bartender? Well, I can't reveal their name on here. I don't know if they'd appreciate me saying it on the podcast. Not that you would know them, but yeah, I had a friend who sort of worked around him in college and post college a little bit. And apparently, John Boehner was like a real wacko. Someone asking specifically about Austin. Do you see traditional houses nearby being replaced by apartment buildings or mostly huge individual homes? It depends where you are. In the more working class areas, they're just sort of kicking people out of their homes, mass scale, and building up those like kind of like neoliberal apartment buildings. In the wealthier neighborhoods, they're the older ones too. They're just tearing them down and building like that kind of, I don't know, that kind of fortress style modern house that's just so ugly to me. So it depends where things are. I mean, there's a lot of, the thing is like, and Austin needs like more multifamily homes and a bigger housing stock than it has. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you can see who the people are. Like the kind of housing that's getting built is like, it's for transitory folks, right? It's for people to live for 3 years, right? It has like the amenities, it has the pool and the gym and the basement, but it's nowhere you really want to settle down for and live for 10, 15 years. It's somewhere to go when you're just starting to make money, in your mid to late 20s, early 30s. And I think that's the kind of thing. It's like, I agree, we do need a lot more multifamily housing here, but it's not, I don't know. It's not housing that I've been seeing. At least it's not housing to that builds community. Prairie Fire says this donation is to go toward a backup power system. Can't have my Discord messages going unanswered by David. Join the Discord and Patreon, folks. We got memes. Sorry about the Longhorns. Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, I need the thing is like people were making a lot of jokes about the grid. It was like it was a big Texas thunderstorm that hit pretty hard. That hit really, really hard. And I mean, I only lost power for about 20 minutes, but I'll get the power generator. Yeah, I don't want to deprive you of my beautiful face. Autumn says they know a really good podcast about Alex Jones. I'd be interested in hearing that. Because I don't know. I mean, I always remind people, like, I watched Alex Jones when he was on public access here in Austin as a kid. I'm just flipping through the channels. But I remember now that crazy guy is like flipping out was Jones. You have to understand, like, public access TV in Austin was really something else back then, too, in the 90s. McConaughey for governor, senator, and president. I wish, man, I really wish I could support McConaughey, man. He seems like everyone I know who's met him says he's a really nice guy. I'm a big fan. I honestly, one of my favorite shows still is True Detective. I watched that entire first season like probably once a year. He's obviously like the champion of the University of Texas. I love that. He's been a great booster and an owner of Austin FC. I like him. I mean, I think he's a good representative of the things that I do like about Austin. But boy, he also shows that kind of really stupid politics. I mean, all of his politics are aphorisms. Like truly, he was saying that he's being challenged by Evans. I can't remember his name at the Texas Tribune. He's being interviewed, and he was asking about Matthew McConaughey's like sort of middle of the line approach he's been taking politics. And God, Evans, I can't remember his last name right now, but the interviewer at Texas Tribune was like, well, they say here in Texas, the only things you find in the middle of the road are yellow lines and dead armadillos. And Matthew McConaughey's response was so zany. He said, well, I think that when you have the car on the left and the car on the right driving so far off the road that the middle is really the place to be. And you just realize, man, you could sell this dude anything. This is not thinking for yourself at this point. If you're only thinking like kind of metaphor and poetry, it's something else. Again, I really like Matthew McConaughey, so it's a bummer that he sort of sucks politically. We got our friend here in the Twitch chat, Super Nintendo Chalmers says, "Hey David, just want to thank you and Matt for all of your work. I really appreciate that. If I could make a guest recommendation for Left Reckoning, it would be awesome for you to chat with Lion Sapita. That's a great idea. We should definitely do that. I'm going to make a note of that right now. Also, hook 'em. Hell yeah. That is a good idea for sure. Oh, I like this. This is a relaxed chat. I need it, man. It's been a long week. I had to drive to Louisiana on Tuesday. That's why we didn't do it then. Louisiana and back. So then I had to drive through fucking Houston twice. Yeah, Strom is making a good point here. The dispossession of poor people across the South has attended to the massive in-migration of wealthier people from elsewhere. I think that's definitely true. The thing, though, that is worth to note, at least with Austin, is that the vast majority of people who are moving here are from Texas, but also Texas is a state of 34 million people. So, I think like the narratives of like California, the Californianization of Austin, like, well, I understand where those come from. I've met those people, boy, and I met one of them recently, and it was something else. I held my tongue. I think it is worth noting that basically the crisis that we're seeing in all of these cities across the country it's it's like there are things we can do on a local level to improve the housing stock and to make things more affordable, but this certainly is a national issue at this point, and it comes from one, housing being a speculative asset, right? One of the most important things that you get from government policy regarding housing is not to make housing affordable. In fact, it's actually to increase the value of housing, which is extremely damaging for working class people trying to get into the market. But it's extremely valuable for people who already own a lot of property. And that dynamic across the country has created a situation where, I mean, there were very few places that you can live in. And I mean, even like, no offense to our friends in, places like Iowa or Nebraska, but you talk to people in Sioux Falls, you talk to people in big cities across the country, or, the big cities relative to their state. And you typically hear similar things of like, oh, well, I can't afford to live here, or people are getting priced out. Right. And they might be at different degrees, right? They might not, the housing prices might have not gone up to an average of $500,000 like they are here for a house. But the fact is that everyone's getting priced out. And there really does have to start to, like, we can find ways to fight this locally, but this actually really needs to start floating to the top of our political movements, because I think that fighting for housing, like in a really articulate way, in a really direct way, might be as galvanizing and mobilizing, if not even maybe more, than Medicare for all. It certainly has a much more radical. It has an extremely radical solution and potential to it, because you're very much are coming for the system of private property itself. I think that is a very viable starting point for building a kind of class politics, because it does draw a pretty clear line between folks. Are you are you one of the many people who can't get something, or are you somebody who's directly benefiting from super high housing prices? Lone Star Leftist says, howdy. I recently befriended a millionaire, a good one, that inherited the money. I'm helping them with stuff and hope to learn more about them and their life experience. Sounds interesting. Thirt's tool. This is interesting. I didn't know about this. The other element is how much new architecture relies on actively powered systems, which really came into the foreground during the freezing problems in Texas last winter. Autumn Leaves says, for everyone interested in Alex Jones' current legal troubles, this episode is an absolute must listen. I'll get the name of it for everybody who's listening. It's called Knowledge Fight. Check it out. I'm not familiar, so I can't endorse, but I trust Autumn's judgment there. All right. Yeah, I might be a little delayed. I might just scroll to the front and come back down if I need to. But yeah, Alex Jones was a public access guy for a really long time. Um, Go Titans, best team in the nation. I'm not a Titans fan, but my fantasy football team has a shitload of Tennessee Titans, including the King, Derrick Henry. So I do need the Titans to do well. Yeah, McConaughey went on British talk shows to talk about how Jordan Peterson, and thank you very much, videos, for the super chat. Talk how great Jordan Peterson is. I'm sorry, like I don't mean I'm not running interference for Matthew McConaughey, but come on, it makes us. You know how every celebrity, they have their charity, right? They're like, oh, I'm going to help out, kids play basketball or like whatever, right? Sometimes it's like we're going to deal cancer or whatever, but sometimes it's very niche. Matthew McConaughey's thing is like giving people pep talks. Like literally it's just like mentorship and like giving people advice. He wrote a book, Green Lights, right, which is just filled with I don't know, just like wild kind of feel good stories about believing in yourself. Honestly, I think if that helps you out, that's good. But I'm just saying, like, you have to understand what like motivates this guy. And like, I don't want to come at Matthew McConaughey as a person because actually I really like him. I think that he's a nice one. I think that the problem is like, I think he's making a mistake if he thinks he needs to be the next leader of Texas. But it's not surprising to me that he likes Jordan Peterson. And I will say, I'm no fan of Jordan Peterson, but it's just like, I'm sure like the vast majority of Matthew McConaughey, I think, interested Jordan Peterson is the guy, the clean your room shit that Jordan Peterson does, right? Take control of your life, fight the demons, defeat the dragon. I think that shit's sort of lame, but I can see why McConaughey's into it. I don't know. I wouldn't read too much into it. Jesus, Autumn, are you a big football fan? Autumn Lee says Titans suck. I have some doubts here. Yeah, Matt McConaughey, nice guy, deep thinker. No, I think that's sort of where we're at. The Titans are not the official team of Left Reckoning. If anything, it's the Cowboys. So we might have to ask Matt Leck what he thinks. Hey, no Louisiana maligning on the chat. I like Louisiana a lot. I got a lot of family out there. How was Super Nintendo says Matthew McConaughey was also on Jordan Peterson's daughter's podcast. It was cringe. Did you listen to it? Do you have any recollection of what exactly they were talking about? I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen too much from the daughter other than, I mean, I know who she is. I've never like listened to her voice, so I have no idea much about her other than what I would assume. Well, Autumn, you were close, but we're actually even talking about the National Football League, so you're double wrong there. I saw McConaughey during ACL a couple years back. Chill guy, not someone I could even picture running for office. Do I live near Justin Murphy? I'm not sure who you mean. Sorry. I mean, Louisiana's rebuilding. It's not destroyed. It's been tough though. I mean, the things like what happens with these kind of storms and evacuations is like there's the physical destruction, but then there's like the systemic destruction, and like people have been missing work and things like that, and that can be really tough. Strom, you don't have to tell it obviously if you're uncomfortable, but where in South Carolina are you? Because I went to high school in Grand Strand, North Myrtle Beach. But Strom says I can speak for South Carolina. They're a recently gentrified neighborhood that are now 80% short-term rental units. Yeah, I mean the explosion of short-term rental is crazy, and I would imagine if you're anywhere near the coast in South Carolina, it's a nightmare. All right. How people lose? I mean, it was a big storm. I mean, a lot of people. I can only talk about my family. They've been able to take care of their issues, the damage from the storm, and are sort of rebuilding. But it slows you down, especially if you're a working person who works for a wage. I mean, you lose a few weeks of pay, and that's really hard. Enrique says, "What do you see as the biggest challenge for the left to overcome the following decade?" I agree. Hard work needs to be done. Um, I think the most tough, the biggest challenges that we're facing right now, um, are the lack of organization. I mean, that's and I don't mean this as a comment because I know I always talk about this. Like at a certain point, it's like we can raise all the awareness about things. We can have like the best read of things, but until we find a way to sort of like, I don't know, to capture the wins of like development amongst working people, we're not going to get very far. I mean, we were talking about this last night with Maximilian Alvarez about like Striketober and this huge increase in worker militancy. We can do everything we can to try to support the strike funds and build movements that can sort of, bring these things, and support these things. But we really are, behind where we need to be able to be even talking about anything like a general strike if we're not even able, for example, to support the few thousand folks who are on strike currently. And I don't mean this to be a bummer. Um, I don't mean this to be a bummer at all, but I think that's the biggest challenge that we have. The encouraging thing is, I think more and more people are becoming more inclined to think about building organizations, because I think people have realized, especially folks who've been around sort of pre Bernie, we were sort of just screaming into the wind. So I don't know. I hope that's not too abstract, but the biggest challenge is going to be building organizations and building organizations that can last longer than, different cycles. I mean, we're already seeing what happened post Bernie. I'm gonna be doing a talk later this month, and maybe I'll see if I can post it up here, about the post Bernie movement, and I'll go more in depth in these things. But we're already seeing that fracture. And DSA, I mean, I don't know. It seems every week there's a big kind of chapter wide blow up. Um, all right. Well, I just want to respond to our friend in South Carolina real quick because they answered my question. They're in Charleston. My family's actually from the PD. Oh, nice. Hell yeah. Um, yeah, I mean Charleston's a beautiful town, but yeah, I mean Charleston, there's a part of it that's just become like Disney World, right? And hell, I mean, if you're a working class member of Charleston, it's very hard to hold on to any sense of community because that shit's been overrun. Whenever I hear people, whenever I lived in New York for 3 years, and whenever I heard somebody start talking about a southern town, I was like, oh fuck, things about to get rough there. Um, um, So Alex Jones is I should go find who his neighbors are and interview him. I know where he lives, not in a creepy way, but he lives down in Westlake, I'm pretty sure. Um, some talk about European football too. I mean, I like soccer well enough. You have to prompt me. Jerry Jones does suck. We like the Cowboys, but we would like to free the team. Um, don't clean your room ever. Bill, clean your room, man. Live a nice life. Don't let spite ruin good things for you. Um, Nicholas says I'm in Lafayette, Louisiana right now. Just landed. Judas Inn is the only place that might have a better burger than Pete Terry's. Damn, I got to give that a go next time we're out there. Um, oh shit, sorry, I misread that. M Tucson said unemployment ended in Louisiana in August. DSA was working on a case for back pay, but it was stalled by the courts. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to fight those fights in the current political dynamic, but hell yeah for people doing that fight. Um, oh, here we go. Jordan's daughter's super into promoting self-diagnosing on her podcast. A lot of it is focused on how a meat-only diet can save you. Now, I'll just say this right now. I don't actually believe any of the stuff about the all meat diet. Like y'all got to eat your vegetables. But I will say, out of all the dumbass shit that those kind of right wing quacks promote, I think the meat only diet is probably one of the funniest ones. Um, at least it has like a little bit of toughness to it, right? Here we go. David, could you tell us more about the time in the Michael Brooks show when you ate the Jim Baker buckets? Yeah, so when we hit 1,000 patrons on TMPS, we had Jim Baker survival food. People who aren't familiar with Jim Baker, he was a televangelist who got caught like in this massive defrauding scheme. I think there's a movie coming out about him right now. But you also familiarize yourself with that story because it is wild. It was up in North Carolina, if I recall correctly. Um, and anyways, he went to prison. He's out of prison now, and he basically sells people slop, to survive the end times. We got the Mexican Fiesta box, and we had to eat it, to celebrate 1,000 patrons. I think Ronald Reagan from of Majority Report fame was the person who purchased us that. So thank you, or I don't know, it was tough. But we realized we didn't have a kitchen in the studio. But luckily, or not luckily, but all of the food, you ate it, you like prepared it by adding hot water because it's all just freeze dried. So we put on a hot water kettle and just poured it into coffee cups. And we got cheese, and tortilla chips, refried beans, and like ground taco meat. And Lord, I mean, it's nasty. Y'all can find it. I mean, I don't know. I don't have. They sort of cut us out of all that stuff at the TMBS thing going on now, but y'all might be able to find it if you're still subscribed to it. I'm sure it's up there wherever that was at, but they it was nasty, man. I mean, it was, of course it's gonna be nasty, but the thing that was weird about it, it really tasted like, I don't know, eating like rotten metal, right? It had like that kind of like nasty iron taste. And it felt like there was some kind of reaction going on. And I I started freaking out a little bit later that night because I was thinking to myself, because I was not feeling good. And I was thinking to myself, no one's probably ever eaten this, right? Like, so if like this shit is like actually just poison that will kill you, like I would be the first one of the first people to go down, right? If they had to do a recall of the Jim Baker food, which I'm sure they probably have to do. So that was some nasty stuff. Um, we got some stuff over here. Um, Extra says, I've been really enjoying the Decoding Gurus podcast that Matt recommended. The Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein episode is hilarious. Hell yeah. And I heard apple cider goes well with that diet. And thank you very much, Gil Nimmer, for subbing to our Twitch channel. All right, well, let me see. I probably have to roll in a minute, but let me make sure I'm not missing any of these good questions. This has been fun. I appreciate it a little thing from the darkness. Like fucking think about how we can defeat this terrible system 24/7. Hell yeah. Enrique says IATSE has announced a deadline to bargaining and will begin a strike on October 18th, 12:01 if an agreement is not reached. Please follow for ways to show solidarity and updates. Hell yeah. It's a big I don't know if we released the conversation with my friend Rob McPherson. I'll do that immediately after this. If you're not a patron, please subscribe. But if not, he was a former TV and movie producer. Kind of the grunt work that we're talking about here, and he sort of broke down why it's such a hard job, and it's worth. It's really crazier than you think, but that's great news. I mean, it's sad that I had to get here, but I'm happy people are prepared to fight. My ultra runner roommate friend was on an all meat diet for a few months. He was not well. Had every metric of an unwell person, yet insisted he was performing better than he ever had. Why were they doing that? I don't understand it. I'm telling you, someone said about the Jim Baker food, it's almost identical to ordering Taco Bell. I promise you it's not. The Jim Baker shit is so nasty. It really is not food. It's the only reason that I was able to continue eating it was because everybody else around you was giving it a go. I mean, it was nasty. It was as nasty as I can get. And you know who I think was there? I mean, who was there? Because we had someone else with us. I can't remember right now. Yeah, I'm gonna be the first one to die eating Jim Baker's food. Hell yeah. Well, Gil says, since I'm TMBS supporting as Palestinian, the Cosmopolitan Socialist Project really made sense to me. Wish I could do more. I'm sure you're doing enough, and I'm happy to hear that was an inspiration for you. All right, let's see, y'all. If I tried to do an all meat diet, I'd probably give up in 2 weeks because of constipating. I just want to thank you for finally releasing the critique of the Goth program. I've been a patron for a while and wanted to share it with friends, but wasn't able. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you know, it's nice when people help support us, but I don't ever feel too precious about sharing things from behind the paywall with folks. I mean, within reason, it's helpful, but you know, we don't want these things to be hard walls or anything like that. But so I want to make sure that people feel like they're getting something for supporting the show as well. I did not know this. I mean, you have to send me some documentation for this, but this would be one of the most American things I could imagine. Wasn't Jim Baker's nephew one of the whistleblowers for Theranos? That'd be awesome if that's if that's the case. No, well, thank you very much. MDR says for good memories with good friends and much better food. Hopefully not served at Bucks. I do appreciate that. Oh, y'all are the best. Lifting my spirits today. This weekend, Matt and I are going to be releasing a conversation on George Orwell. He is, y'all are the best in the chat. We're going to be releasing a conversation on George Orwell. He's, Matt's a big George Orwell fan. I like George Orwell a lot. I was really into him when I was younger. I think I'm a little bit more sympathetic to a lot of the criticisms of Orwell, specifically him turning over a list of people, including Paul Robeson, over to the British intelligence. But I do think George Orwell still is somebody worthwhile reading and valuable. So we're going to be releasing a conversation about that on Sunday for patrons. Once Matt sends me the text, I'll post the text for patrons as well if you want to read along before. But yeah, y'all are the best. I will see you, I guess it was Thursday, so I'll be back on Tuesday for a regularly scheduled Griscom stream. This has been a fun Thursday. It was nice to just sort of hang out for a little bit. I'll see y'all. I'll see you on Sunday. Take care, and as always, feel free to reach out to us with any questions or things you might want to see us cover. Or also, we love hearing work stories too. Any tough work stories or anything like that. Or even better, success stories where you've been able to push back against an asshole boss. I always love to hear it from y'all. All right. Talk to y'all later.